Hi everyone, Ed Bixby here from Spotlight Now on the GGBA. I'm here with Leksi Kostur. Leksi is a biodesigner whose work explores how material innovation can connect design with nature. Trained at Central St. Martin's in London, Leksi creates wearable works and ceremonial designs using biodegradable materials she develops from seaweed and other natural sources. Her practice bridges design, social science, and material research, merging scientific inquiry with storytelling and symbolism. She has applied her material knowledge to design displays, sets, and stages with Rewrite Design, the UK-based studio she co-founded, and has showcased her work at the Glastonbury Festival, the New York Design Festival, London Design Festival, and the Science Museum in London. In addition to her design practice, Leksi has lectured in biodesign at leading institutions, including the University of Arts, London, and the Royal College of Art. Rooted in her Pacific Northwest upbringing, Leksi's work reflects a deep respect for natural systems and the belief that design can bring us into alignment with them. So, welcome, Leksi.
Thank you, Ed. It's great to be here.
It's wonderful to have you, and it's always great, to introduce people like yourself to our GGBA audience because the work you're doing is important and it's so artistic. It's really this blue sky thinking leads to so much more. So we really appreciate what you do. So why don't we get started by learning a little bit more about your background in biodesign?
Yeah. So I actually started in social science. I studied psychology and anthropology for my bachelor's, and I moved into product design for my master's about a year after graduating, at which point I moved to London to study at CSM. And so that was when I was sort of first formally introduced to biomaterials, although it wasn't part of my program. So I kind of came to biomaterials with a project that I was doing as part of my master's, but I had to discover them on my own, which was kind of a plus and a minus because I was navigating those waters on my own, but I learned a lot as a result. So I ended up using biomaterials for my burial project, which we're here to talk about today. And so that's kind of how I came to them. And then to date, I've created a number of unique materials for applications in the creative industries, and I've applied those to sets and displays, as you mentioned, and then also fashion and accessory design, which I'm doing more of now. And I worked in the UK for the past 5 years. I co-ran a business there to create the biodegradable displays and products. And then I also worked in labs, so I instructed in biodesign, and I learned a lot about the materials through that. Sort of developed my own practice through working with students and facilitating their graduate projects. So now I'm back in the States. I recently moved back and I'm continuing that work here, primarily in ephemeral compostable fashion. So it's been an exciting journey, which continues to evolve. And that's what's so exciting about biodesign. It's this new field, and there's a lot of space to explore and to create these new materials with really exciting uses. So yeah, that's kind of my journey to date.
And that's awesome. I mean, in many ways, and for many reasons. Of course, you're doing a lot of exciting things for, let's say, the living, but when it comes to death and dying, when people make choices like this is the last, like a living testament to the way they live their life. So I really see a special place, probably a place you never maybe even imagined, for your product to really make a big difference, not only environmentally but spiritually as well. And tell us a little bit about the Continuum project. Like, what inspired you to create a funeral product for your master's thesis?
Yeah, it was an interesting journey. I had lost two people close to me, and from anecdotally, from what I've heard, it's a common way that people start designing for the funeral industry is kind of a firsthand experience with funeral. So yeah, I'd lost two people within about a year of each other, and at the time, I was in my second year of my master's degree, and at the time of that second death, I'd just begun doing a conceptual project for school about death. So that was the brief. I hadn't chosen it. I was just assigned to the project. And I was so shocked by this death in my family that I almost pulled out of the project. I just felt like, it was too overwhelming and I couldn't engage with the subject matter. But I decided to give give it a go. I decided, okay, I'll attend the first meeting and see what happens. And then if I still want to pull out of the project, I will. So I went to that first meeting, and it was sort of a scavenger hunt around London where we explored places, monuments, objects, just different spaces that somehow related to death. And we talked about it openly in a very different way than I'd actually talked about death before. I find that death comes up frequently, but typically as a joke or in some sensationalized way based on something that's been seen in the media. So it was a very new experience for me. And I came away from that first project day feeling like this is something that I could engage with and actually could be, quite therapeutic for me to engage with it. So I decided to stay on the project despite the recent loss. And I ended up enjoying it so much that my ideas were sort of bubbling over for death design. And I wanted to continue it beyond the project. We just didn't have enough time to complete some of the things that I wanted to. So the following project for my course curriculum was the thesis project, which was a solo project. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to continue focusing on death for that because it's such a rich, meaningful territory to explore with design. And so I went forward with that. And then I also, it's important, I think, in my process to note that I went to a funeral, a typical kind of standard Western funeral for the first time. And I was really impacted by how cold and impersonal it felt. And so that sort of motivated me to push the boundaries of the physical design of the product. Um, and so, yeah, I think that's kind of how I came to Continuum, and it sort of became a passion of mine to demystify death and start, removing the layers of fear surrounding it for myself and for others, with the ultimate goal being acceptance and claiming agency over what the end looks like.
Absolutely. And you hit a couple key points there. In death and dying, because our society has tried to, unfortunately, let's say, not maybe the word ignore or not want to talk about it. It has made us fearful and not understanding how close we as human beings really are to death and dying itself when it comes
Yeah.
to us understanding it. So sounds like your passion comes from that light bulb turning on and saying, wow, this is really something that's important. So I totally get it. You're
Yeah,
among
definitely.
probably everyone within our movement has had that moment that you've experienced. And what's really important is, to talk about, like, with what you're doing, what are the components of the continuum cocoon? Can you walk us through its design when you designed that and what the meaning behind
Hmm.
each element was?
Yeah. So, as you probably have seen, it's quite a ritualistic project, and I brought my social science background in there. And it's also an artistic project, but first and foremost, I really wanted it to be realistic. So, I spoke with the Association of Natural Burial Grounds in the UK, which is where my research was based because I was doing my master's there. And I integrated their advice into my design because, I was also on an industrial design course, so it needed to be a practical solution that really worked. Because, there was some media hype around some designs that had come out during the time that were not the most feasible shapes for burial and all of that. So I decided I really want to make this realistic in the event that I take it forward as well, which I'm currently doing. So I'm glad that I did that work up front. But I wanted the cocoon itself to be beautiful, oh, sorry, and different from what I'd seen. There's such a diversity of people and preferences and practices surrounding burial, and I felt like that wasn't quite reflected in the offerings I found during my market research. It was kind of a limited range and a limited color palette. So I looked at ways that I could beautify the burial process and the products. And for that, I looked to decomposers, so insects and fungi and bacteria, and their natural color, their natural translucence and textures. And I found that the biomaterials that I was developing at that time lended themselves nicely to that aesthetic. So in terms of the components of the actual product, it's essentially a baseboard for transportation and carrying of the body, and then a biodegradable shroud and accessories. So I used wool and bioplastics to create various accessories to cover the body, which sits beneath the final component, which is the cocoon wings, which sit atop the body on the baseboard. And that's kind of what you see in the images are the kind of blue, green, purple cocoon wings. And then for how the product works, it's a procession. So the body is carried on the baseboard, and then a ceremony takes place, choreographed depending on the beliefs of the family and the departed. And then the wings are removed, and the body is buried, and the grave is covered. And then the wings that were previously removed are placed on top of the grave. And then as it rains, the wings, which are made out of a seaweed bioplastic, begin to dissolve. And because they contain seeds, native wildflower seeds, the seeds begin to germinate with the moisture and the contact with the ground. And then the gravesite essentially turns into a natural garden. So the wildflowers sprout, and all that's left behind is a garden of flowers. So it's really about combating the death denial mindset and choosing to say no to things like embalming, coffin liners, and those practices that are intended to keep a body looking alive, even though it's not, and thus polluting the ecosystem at the grave. And ultimately about life cycle, the concept of continuing, hence the name, and also making our last action one of giving back instead of taking more from the land.
Absolutely. And it sounds, it is stunning and it is beautiful. And I think the most important thing to understand, for our viewers is that what makes this event so meaningful is that it's a true celebration of a life that was lived, and the artistic aspect, the things that go into a ceremony like this are so different, so foreign in today's world. But I think we're connected to an ancient past through the earth and through things like this. I think people,
Absolutely.
yeah, I feel like it's in our DNA. It's locked up in a box in our brain. People don't realize they possess this innate ability to care for their loved ones. And then the natural aspect, we are so in touch with the earth, even if we aren't, we just don't realize it. So
Yeah.
I love what I hear. It
Thank you.
really, you've done wonderful work. You obviously are far more in touch with yourself and with death and dying than you probably ever gave yourself credit for. I must imagine. It's just something within
Thanks.
you. So, how long did it take to perfect your piece from the first creation to the final product? I mean, I imagine the process has changed and been reimagined throughout
Hmm.
that process.
Yeah. So because it was my thesis, I only had about 6 months to complete it, and it was kind of a circuitous path to the final look of the product. It was filled with, material experiments and design iterations and lots of research and conversations with people from so many fields, because death is, like I said, is just such a rich topic. It's connected to so many disciplines. I mean, it is sort of like the essence of life. So, yeah, it was a long process that was crammed into a short period of time, and that was about 3 years ago. And I hadn't developed the product since, but I recently decided to post it on my social media, and it got such a positive and heartfelt response on TikTok. And I always knew that I wanted to take the project forward in some capacity, after graduating. So it was really heartening to see that it resonated with other people, because I didn't really get that feedback initially. So it was very meaningful to me. And personally, I was really happy that I had done it, but I didn't know to what extent, other people would engage with it. So I am really interested in taking it forward. And that's sort of my next step at this point. And any sustainable work in the burial space is positive, in my mind. And so I want to continue making my contribution to that.
I agree. And you made a comment that death is the essence of life, and in so many ways people don't realize that, but the
Yeah.
death and dying, or the natural order of things, leads to new life. So it really is a
Yeah.
new beginning. So it's a great way to look at it, to be honest with you. I don't think you hear that too often. You've come up with a
Yeah.
fantastic idea to serve families with a unique funeral experience. Now that you've created something so special, do you see yourself creating other unique options that could be applied to the natural burial, funeral, and service?
Yeah, I think so. I've developed so much in my practice since I created Continuum because I've gone down this road of biodesign. Um, and that was my first year of working with seaweed materials when I had initially done that project. So my repertoire of materials and knowledge has expanded considerably since, especially through my lab experiences and also my business rewrite, where my business partner and I worked at Glastonbury, and we got to showcase new materials every year. And through that, experimented with so many techniques and different adhesives and coatings and coloring systems and all of that now have given me so many ideas for Continuum. And the other thing that I'm working on right now is weddings, another pivotal ceremonial moment in life, that is associated with so much waste and could really benefit from compostable, disposable accessories and decor rather than plastic disposables. So because of that work, I have a lot of ideas of how I could fine tune the design of Continuum, particularly the accessories and the shroud that sits beneath the cocoon, because I've developed in those areas quite a bit. And I think, like I said earlier, it's a final costume and it should be celebratory. And I have a lot of ideas of how I could make it more so and make it more customizable so that it reflects the tastes of different people. So I'm hopeful and very excited about where that could go next. And that's kind of what I'm working on right now.
Well, I'm here listening to you, and you've got such a unique perspective and product. It's really, oddly enough, kind of like cradle to the grave in many ways.
Yeah.
It falls within life and living and everything all the way to the end. So I can't imagine you've got a concept that would just take on a life of its own in so many different ways. It's hard to every day of the week, I'm sure you're coming up with new ideas as to how this can be applied. There's no doubt about it. I mean, so I think it's I love that. I think that that's the way it should be. And and as an artist, which you are, how do you feel funeral products can serve as a medium for self-expression for families and funeral providers and designers alike?
Yeah, I think that acquainting ourselves with death whenever we can is so important. And I think artists are perhaps more willing to engage with topics that are deemed taboo by society. And I feel like this is one topic that really needs to be engaged with because it shouldn't be taboo. It is something that every person experiences. It's the only thing, I always say, like, it's the only thing that we have to do once we're born is die. And so it's worth giving thought to. So yeah, I think reframing our concept of death not as an end, but like you were saying, a continuation in a different form and looking at how our final act can be one of giving back and the self-expression in that. I think there's so much room for self-expression. I mean, it's like people look at their weddings as a big show that they have all their friends and family, loved ones at, and that as kind of like theatrical, but death should be the same in my opinion. And it'll probably always be, a little bit scary to most people, but I think it really can be demystified and you can gain agency over your death. And I think there's a lot of power in that. So I think everyone should engage with it. Artists and non-artists, everyone's an artist in my opinion, but I think it's so worthwhile.
You're absolutely correct. And, I just experienced a funeral very recently. I've been doing this for a very long time. And this was a group of individuals who were very connected to the earth. And the whole process took about 4.5 hours. And I'll tell you, I don't know that I've ever been to a party that was so much fun. And it
Wow.
was a funeral. And this
Yeah.
individual who had passed had planned all of this because she had wanted this to be unique and beautiful and something that everyone would always remember as, like, this final send off. And I think the products that you're designing, lend to that. It gives it that unique, individual, wonderful feeling. So, Lexi, you're doing great stuff. How can the viewers at the GGBA support and learn more about your work?
Yeah, thanks. I've been sharing my work on my social media more. Took me a while to start doing that, but I've started it, and so I've been sharing on TikTok and Instagram, and my user is Leksi Kostur, Leksikostur. Um, and just focusing on weddings and funerals both, but continuing works, especially in the funeral realm. And then I also have a website, which is leksikostur.com, where I will be publishing my design work. So you can find me there.
Absolutely. And we at the GGBA, we want to be able to support people like yourself. So please do always keep in touch with us. If you ever have announcements or if something big's coming up, we'll love to share it for you and get our viewers involved. But it's been a pleasure, Leksi. Thanks for joining us today. And again, viewers, you can learn more by visiting leksikostur.com. This is Ed Bixby from the Global Green Burial Alliance, and this is Spotlight Now.